I'd like to call this council meeting for May 19th, 2020 to order. Madam Clerk, the invocation. Ordinarily, we would all rise, but under the circumstances, I'll ask you to do the invocation.
We meet to serve our community and endeavor to be worthy custodians of all that has been entrusted to us. Let us be concerned only for what will promote good government. May we bring to our council chamber minds that think and hearts that feel, so that in our deliberations, we may display imagination, wisdom, and courage, and the will to do our work for the good of all.
Amen.
Thank you. We begin this meeting by acknowledging that the land on which we gather collectively is the territory, the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Mississaugas of New Credit, and the Anishinaabe people. Madam Clerk, the roll call, please.
All members of council are present, your worship. Regional Councillor Encina sends his regrets.
Thank you. There is no addendum to this evening's agenda. I just want to make a brief update with respect to COVID-19 for the benefit of the community. Today, the Government of Ontario has extended the emergency orders first announced in March to May 29th, 2020. This includes the continued closure of all restaurants and bars, with the exception of those providing takeout service, and playgrounds and other public water facilities, as well as restrictions on gatherings of more than 5 people. The Premier also announced that all publicly funded schools would remain closed until September. On the other hand, the province has begun the first stage of reopening the economy. Also today, the Government of Canada announced the extension of border restrictions to essential travel to June 21st, 2020. Well, this is a time for optimism that we have seen the worst of COVID-19. It is not a time for complacency. History has far too many examples of those who have prematurely declared victory or mission accomplished. In a very real sense, complacency is now our enemy. Now more than ever, we need to follow the simple rules that got us to this point. Wash your hands regularly, avoid touching your face, maintain physical distance from one another, stay at home as appropriate. By taking the precautions that will keep others safe, we show respect for our friends, neighbors, co-workers, and strangers. Not one of us would dream of jeopardizing any member of our own family. And let's do all that we can not to jeopardize others. Let's show respect to those around us, and more particularly, those that we rely on to assist us if we are or become ill, if we are in an emergency, or if we need service. The vast majority of us have abided by the directives and orders established by the government. We have been conscientious in washing our hands, keeping physical distance, leaving home only when necessary. But as the economy reopens and restrictions begin to be eased, I see an unintentional relaxation of those rules. People gathering in groups of more than 5, people getting just a little too close to each other, people disregarding the rules with respect to in-store shopping. I understand that humans are social beings. We need the company of others. Our friends frequently help to define us. But we have come so far in fighting the dreaded scourge. We have made such sacrifices as we have come to understand that life in time of pandemic can be very fragile. So I urge all of you to continue to take this virus seriously. Don't let your guard down. If we persist in doing the things that are necessary, we will succeed in containing and overcoming this virus. So please keep washing your hands, maintain physical distance, and stay safe. There are no other announcements. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Madam Clerk, I have 2. The first relates to PDS 23-2020, which is the cannabis study, since I have a client who is engaged in the possibility of constructing another cannabis facility. And also new business item 11D, which deals with the Ministry of Health billing codes, because my youngest daughter is a physician and periodically does bill for telehealth services. So when we get to those parts of the agenda, Councillor McDermott will assume the chair. There are no notices of public meetings.
Mayor Redekop.
Yes, Councillor Lubberts.
Yeah, Councillor Butler.
Sorry,
Sorry.
I did have a declaration as well.
I'm sorry.
I know, that's okay. I didn't raise my hand high enough for you to see it. Sorry
Okay,
about that.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. So I'm going to declare a pecuniary interest also with PDS 23-2020 as I'm an investor in a cannabis
Right.
fund. Thank you.
Yes, please, and please, if I miss anything, if I miss any of you waving frantically, don't hesitate to speak up. I've got two eyes and not always watching where I should be. So just to make sure, are there any other pecuniary interests that anyone wishes to declare? Okay. So then we'll go to, so there are no upcoming public meetings. The one property rezoning with respect to Town Line Road will be postponed until such time as we are satisfied that we can hold a public hearing of some meaning. That takes us to the regional councillors report. And Madam Clerk, I understand that Councillor Encina has provided you with some notes with respect to this matter.
That's correct, Your Worship. At the last council meeting, I discussed the community safety zones that are being created and the steps to add speed enforcement technology to them. Transportation Services Department at the region performed an in-depth analysis looking at the speed areas, school type, daily volume of traffic, percent of sidewalks, boulevards, playgrounds, parks, and recreation centers, the number of students walking or crossing regional roads and collision data. Also taken into consideration was geographic system data, traffic data, and on-site visits by regional staff. Niagara Student Transportation Service provided approximate numbers of people traveling to schools from neighboring areas, walking or crossing regional roads. The roads were looked at to see if there were any existing features that are already in place. In Fort Erie, for example, Garrison Road area by the elementary school was looked at, but a traffic signal already exists, and that would hopefully mitigate some of the problems. The locations that had nothing were looked at first, and as the plan rolls out, more locations will be looked at. The area of Central Avenue in between Bertie and Gilmore has no traffic controls in the area. This is only a small part of the plan that's been rolled out. Regional Council has committed to Vision Zero now and in the coming years. I, along with Mayor Redekop, have been dealing with Niagara Public Health regarding the release of information to the municipalities concerning COVID-19. At the Public Works Committee, a resolution was made to direct the medical officer to release data as it relates to the virus in municipalities. The resolution goes before Regional Council this week for hopefully confirmation. The financial costs of dealing with COVID-19 continue to mount. As you can expect, the costs are ever changing and fluid. Driving the deficits that we are facing at the region are Niagara Regional Transit fare reductions, public health, increased HR costs, supplies, and call volumes that need to be answered. POA court, reduced revenue from tickets. Paramedic services, increased staffing, cleaning, and overtime. Housing, increased cleaning costs, lower tenant income, which equals higher subsidies. Homelessness program, increased costs to cover agencies dealing with homelessness. Children's services, loss of revenue. Senior services, increased cost of cleaning and PPE. Many of the projects that were set to begin this year had to be put on hold. With the releasing of some of the restrictions by the province, they are set to begin. With respect to the new Gilmore Lodge, plans have been pushed back, and it is anticipated that the work will begin at the site in May 2021 rather than October of this year. And that's all he had.
Thank you very much. I would ordinarily ask for questions by members of council, but I don't think any of you can, I don't think Carol can respond to that. If you've got any questions with respect to regional business that you want to raise, I can try to respond to them. I'm on the corporate services and planning committees, not on public health and public works, which Councillor Encina is. So does anyone have any questions? Councillor Dubanow?
No,
And
not
then
so much a question, Your Worship. I just I want to extend my appreciation to Councillor Encina for providing that information on the metrics that they use to determine where the speed enforcement would be used, because I raised that during one of our last meetings looking for that information. So just want to mention that I appreciate him providing that. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Councillor Butler.
Yes, Your Worship, I wanted to thank you and Councillor Encina for pushing for the release of data regarding COVID-19. And I just wonder, when Regional Council does vote for it, how quickly will that be enacted?
Theoretically, relatively quickly. We were told a month ago that Public Health was actually working on a map that would break out the statistics municipality by municipality. I don't know how much work has actually been done on that. There's been I want to be cautious in what I say, but there appears to be some intransigence in moving in that direction for whatever reason. The cloud that's been put over it is privacy and confidentiality. I don't really think either of those are applicable. So I really can't tell you how quickly, but I would expect that the regional council will approve the direction to the chief, to the medical officer of health with respect to that. I have some other questions as well relative to the data that Public Health is putting up on its website. It's sometimes confusing. It's frequently inconsistent and needs to be tightened up a bit. So that's something that I will be addressing as well.
And if I may, does the regional health director, does he give you any indication on with respect to any outbreaks in certain areas, or is that just generalized as well?
So as part of the website for Public Health, and this would be the medical officer of health, as part of the website, there is a listing of where outbreaks have occurred in long-term care homes. It's very vague information. It simply indicates that an outbreak occurred at a specific site. It doesn't indicate numbers. It indicates whether it was COVID-19 or some other respiratory type of infection. So it's very unspecific. In terms of other institutions over which the region may have some authority or may have some regulatory jurisdiction, we're not specifically given that information, except it's provided, I guess, a one-on-one situation. With respect to a recent outbreak at one of the local long-term care homes, the information was distributed by email May the 14th. The website wasn't actually updated. The public health website wasn't actually updated until May the 18th, which really needs to be worked on.
Thank you. That was it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other councillors? Then we'll move on. There are obviously no presentations or delegations, and that takes us then to the consent agenda. Are there any items that anyone wishes removed from the consent agenda? If not, then Councillor Zanko, you have the resolution for approval of the consent agenda items.
Yes, I do. Thank you. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor McDermott, that council approves the consent agenda items as recommended.
Are there any questions or comments with respect to any of the items? Councillor Butler and then Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just have one question with respect to correspondence to the proclamation for the Fort Erie Museum. I'm just wondering if a notice of motion would be in order so that a request doesn't have to come forward, making it an annual proclamation. Is that possible?
Madam Clerk.
Everyone submits it annually. It's not something that we track. They have asked us before and I've explained to them why.
Okay.
It's just not something that we can take care of. They need to make that request. It has to be a formal request that comes in by letter so it gets on the agenda and then we can make the proclamation.
Okay, thank you.
From my perspective, Councillor Butler, and that's a very good question, and I wondered about that when I looked at it, but it seems to me it's a good opportunity for the organization to bring to the attention of the community the fact that this is a rather unique event and it has a very interesting history in terms of its relationship to the Battle of Ridgeway. So I would think that it would be helpful for us to be reminded each and every year that this has happened and that June the 2nd has some significance in our community. Anything further, Councillor Butler? Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Mayor Redekop. Wanted to comment on Communication C, the Accessibility Advisory Committee National Access Awareness Week. I wanted to recognize that what a great committee that this is that represents our town and what wonderful staff we have that support it. We've had committee members here, I think, that have been on since its inception, including myself. And I think we are recognized in the business community as being a very valuable resource. And many times we're being asked by different businesses to comment on things that they may do or how they can improve their access. So we're very appreciative of the businesses asking us questions and the general population asking us, and very appreciative of the staff support for this committee.
Thank you, Councillor Noyes. Those are all excellent comments.
And the other one I wanted to comment was communication D in regards to internet connectivity in rural Ontario. Say that 10 times fast. Ward 6 does have a major problem with this. And I don't know whether just supporting this or we should perhaps draft our own letter, really emphasizing how important it is. I think COVID-19 kind of points out the need for internet connection, and even the government themselves, like I think it's the province or the feds, are going to start putting training, like exercise seminars and things for seniors and different organizations via the web. Like, I mean, you can tune into them for health and wellness suggestions. Again, those people who don't have access to the internet are really then kind of like out of luck for this. So I don't know whether just supporting this is enough, or we should perhaps come up with our own letter and pointing out the need.
So two parts. We should support this, number one, and number two, a letter to the upper levels of government wouldn't be out of order. The reality is that we have had a lot of communication with Bell, Cogeco, and NRBN, Niagara Region Broadband, with respect to expanding high-speed internet service in the rural areas in Fort Erie. We've had some level of success with some and not so much success with others up until this time. And now with the pandemic, this seems to be a good time for us to be pushing that particular issue. Kelly Davis has been engaged in dialogue with respect to all three of those organizations, and Mr. Cookett has also been involved. So I would think that if we pass this resolution, we can then also send out a letter along similar lines to the appropriate federal and provincial ministers.
Thank you, I would appreciate that.
Any other inquiries or comments? There being none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the resolution? None opposed, that is carried. That then takes us to reports, and the first report is PDS 22-2020, and Councillor Noyes, you have that resolution.
Yes, moved by myself, and I need a seconder.
I'd like to second that, Councillor Zanko.
Zanko. The PDS 22-2020 extension of draft plan approval, Hazelwood draft plan of subdivision, west side of Hazelwood Avenue, north of Erie Road, roll number 2703-020-017-387000000 and 2703-020 01737000000. Knopf Group Incorporated, Jen Knopf owner, Pursuit Development Incorporated, Dimitri Yakimov agent. That the council draft plan approval for Hazelwood draft plan of subdivision located at the west side of Hazelwood Avenue, north of Erie Road until April 5th, 2021, and the owner and Regional Municipality of Niagara Planning and Development Services Department be so advised, and further, that council directs that the conditions of the approval for the Hazelwood draft plan of subdivision be amended as detailed in Appendix 5 of the report number PDS 22-2020, and further, the council directs the written notification of the amended conditions is not required due to the minor nature of the change in accordance with Section 5147 of the Planning Act.
Are there any questions or comments? Ms. Dolch, I had a couple of questions, and I'm not sure if you can answer both of them, but apparently there's been some issues with respect to obtaining servicing approvals, and that's why the need for the extension.
That's correct. What they're trying to do is they need to provide a stormwater pond. They're now looking, hoping to locate it on town property rather than their own property. They had some options storing the stormwater in pipes in the roads, but it was just too tight. So they're looking at alternatives right now on how to achieve servicing out there.
And if the town were to consider allowing the stormwater management pond to be on municipal property, that would be something that council would have to deal with?
That's correct. It would go to our land committee and then on to council from there.
And the other concern that I had with respect to this particular development is the proximity to the wetlands to the west. So I'm presuming that drainage is an important factor with respect to this entire development.
It is because of the wetland. We do need to make sure that wetland continues to receive the water. So we do need to make sure, and it's received at a quality standard. So we do need to make sure that the stormwater system functions the way it needs to.
Okay. Are there any other questions or comments? There being none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the resolution? Opposed? That is carried. So Councillor McDermott, if you would be good enough to take the chair for PDS 23-2020, please, because I have a conflict on that.
Thank you, Worship. I have the Councillor Dubanow. You got to move this.
Yeah, I'll move it. I just don't have a copy of the resolution in front of me.
Okay, do you want me to read it out then?
If, Mr. Chair, if you're okay with that, sure.
Okay, so it's PDS 23-2020, Terms of Reference, Cannabis Legislation and Policy Study. The council approves the terms of reference for cannabis legislation and policy study for the town of Port Erie as outlined in report number PDS 23-2020. So that's moved by Councillor Dubanow and seconded by Councillor Zanko. Any comments or questions? Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Councillor McDermott. I did have an opportunity talking to Ms. Dolch earlier today, and I do understand that it'll be best practice, and they will consider, I know when you look at the list, it refers to rural agricultural, but they will also be looking at residential, industrial, and also commercial opportunities, or whether that it'll kind of come up in the wash, so to speak. And I'm pleased that there's going to be at least two public meetings for public input. I'm not sure how we're going to contact all those people, but once we get the date set, and I think, again, with the COVID-19, I don't know how we're going to nail down a date yet, but we'll have to get there somehow.
Do you have any comments on that, Ms. Dolch?
I can just add that, yes, we are looking at best practices as Councillor Noyes indicated, and it will include the impacts to residential areas for whatever we propose, as well as opportunities perhaps in commercial areas, but it'll be best practice approach, looking at the legislation, doing a legal review of that legislation, as well as looking at a number of impacts, such as we've listed: noise, odor, traffic, property values, things like that. And in terms of the open houses and public meetings, hopefully we may be in a situation when we get to this stage that we may be able to host some smaller public meetings. But at this point, we would have to plan for digital ones. But we do still have a lot of work to do at the front end in terms of the policy analysis.
Okay, thank you for that. Any further comments or questions? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. I'll throw that back to you, Your Worship.
Can't hear you, Mayor Redekop.
Yeah, you're muted, Your Worship.
Somebody muted me. Okay. My wife must have snuck into the chamber. That takes us to PDS 24-2020. And Councillor Lubberts, I believe you have the resolution for that.
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor Redekop. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Zanko. That there's a request, we got to put it on the floor first, I guess, right?
You bring a motion and put this on the floor, correct? You have
Request
the
to
resolution.
remove environmental conservation overlay for the construction of a dwelling and septic system on 1563 Kingston Road, roll number 2703 020 010 67 600 0000. Michael McDonald and Amber Doherty, owners. Have a seconder, Councillor Zanko.
Counselor, looks like Counselor Noyes put her hand up.
Zanko, I got Zanko marked down.
You've got Zanko, okay. Zanko it is. Please proceed.
Okay. We'll move forward.
Yes,
That council approves the removal of the environmental conservation overlay at 1563 Kingston Road to the extent required for the construction of proposed dwelling, septic system, driveway, cistern, and required yards, subject to the owner submitting a landscape plan and a tree preservation plan prepared by a qualified professional to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning and Development Services or his or her designate. And further, that council directs the owner is required to provide a security deposit and a written undertaking to provide the landscape plan to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning and Development Services or his or her designate to ensure the approved landscape plan is completed.
are there any questions or comments with respect to the report or the resolution? Counselor Lubberts.
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor Redekop. When reading the report, well, first of all, I just want to mention that EAC, the members of EAC, all participated and went on their own and did their site visit of the property and provided the comments which are in the report. But when you look at the report, you'll see that the NPCA permit, they're requiring that the owner use the FLAP guidelines, which is the Fatal Light Awareness Plan. And I'm just wondering why it is that staff didn't recommend that we use the town's bird-friendly guidelines as well. It was requested by the chairperson of EAC.
Ms. Dolch.
Through you to the counselor. The reason we didn't recommend it, our bird safe guidelines are clear in terms of it is to be not used for single detached dwellings outside of Point Abano, where we have site plan control. So that's why we didn't recommend it. We felt that FLAP guidelines were already covered in the permit from the NPCA. But should council wish to add it, we can, but we would have to add site plan control to that requirement. Otherwise, it would just be a guidance to them.
Counselor Lubberts.
So what I'm gathering is if we use our bird-friendly guidelines, it has to be under site plan control.
Correct.
We can't use it like NPCA uses FLAP.
Ms. Dolch.
Through you to the counselor. We just have no control. We would be happy to provide them with the bird safe guidelines as a guide for them to use, but in order to control that they use them, we'd have to make sure that it was done through site plan control. If you wanted some assurances that they did put those bird safe guidelines into place. And that's why we have it recommended in the Point Abano area under site plan control so that we can control those things.
Okay, then Mayor Redekop, I'd like to request that staff provide the owner with our bird-friendly guidelines and ask the owners to consider using our bird-friendly guidelines as well as FLAP.
I see Ms. Dolch is shaking her head up and down, so she can certainly provide the guidelines to the property owners. It'll be up to them whether they go that extra step, but she certainly can provide that. You don't need to amend this if Ms. Dolch is
yeah.
agreeable. Okay.
Okay, thanks, Ms. Dolph.
Any other councillors? If none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the resolution? None opposed, that is carried. That then takes us to IS 24-2020. And Councillor Zanko, you have that resolution.
Yes, I do. Thank you. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor McDermott, that with regard to IS 24-2020, award of tender for replacement of the Leisureplex banquet flooring, contract number ISF-20T LP FR 19, that council accepts and approves the tender submission from Siriani Construction Limited for the replacement of the Leisureplex banquet hall flooring, contract number ISF-20T LP FR 19 in the amount of $76,614, including the 13% HST.
Are there any questions or comments by members of council? If not, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the resolution? None opposed, that is carried. That takes us then to CAO 10-2020, and Councillor Dubanow, you have the resolution for that report.
Just bear with me, Your Worship.
Resolution number.
Yep, I've got it. Resolution 6, right?
Yep.
Oh, perfect. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor McDermott, that CAO-10-2020, the Town of Fort Erie Business Continuity Update, that council receives report number CAO-10-2020 for information purposes.
Are there any questions or comments, which I'll go to, but I just want to compliment staff for all the work that they've done as reflected in this report. They've done a remarkable job at all levels, and I know that the people that are working on the front lines as well have done a remarkable job for the municipality. So Mr. Cookett, you and your staff are to be commended for the work that you've done over the past 9 or 10 months 10 weeks, only seems like 10 months, during this pandemic, as well as prior to that. You did a good job before that as well. But I think that needs to be said, and this report is very comprehensive. Ms. Morden has done an excellent job. Any questions or other questions or comments? Then I will call the question. All those in favor of the report? None opposed, that is carried. That then takes us to report CS 07-2020, and I believe Councillor McDermott, you have that report? You have the resolution?
Thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Zanko. The CS 07-2020 COVID-19 financial impacts. The council receives report number CS 07-2020 regarding COVID-19 financial impacts for information purposes. And further, the council supports the motions of Region of Niagara Report CHR 2-2020 for active collaboration between all regional municipalities to assure the exchange of critical information and the development of short, medium, and long-term impacts of COVID-19 and coordinate the response and required advocacy strategies to the federal and provincial governments for financial relief related to COVID-19.
Thank you, Councillor McDermott. And again, I want to compliment Mr. Jansen for his work on this and the work of his staff. They treat the taxpayers' money as if it was their own. And Mr. Jansen, you are particularly frugal. So I want to commend you on that. In terms of the second part of the resolution, I should mention to councillors that a letter has been circulated among mayors and the regional chair for submission to the Minister of Finance federally and provincially. And that will probably be going out sometime tomorrow or Thursday. Are there any questions or comments with respect to the report? Councillor Dubanow and then Councillor Noyes.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. And just to kind of build on some of your comments regarding the work that staff have done, we discussed this during our most recent Corporate Services Business Subcommittee meeting. And not to go into too long, but just to say that as a taxpayer in the town of Fort Erie, I feel very fortunate knowing that we are in the financial position that we're in, that the impacts are not as bad as they could be. And when you see other municipalities, I think John Tory today was mentioning how, Toronto is looking for a bailout because of the financial impacts. I think Vancouver had mentioned something earlier that they're on the verge of bankruptcy if they can't do anything. We are so lucky to have such a sound financial footing in this municipality that from looking at things, we don't know where we're going to be tomorrow, but as it looks right now, we're very fortunate. And I just wanted to say that and extend my appreciation to Mr. Jansen and his entire department and staff, because this could be a lot worse, and we're very fortunate to be in the position we're in. And I wanted to share that. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Dubanow. Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Mayor Redekop. I do apologize to Mr. Jansen. I haven't had a chance to talk to him on this question yet, but I think it's an easy question. On page 3 of 12, it talks about that people can defer their payments for certain things that, and we're not going to charge them for insufficient, that they can delay the payment. Is that automatic, or do you have to request that?
Mr. Jansen.
Through the mayor to Councillor Noyes. Yeah, most of those are automatic. So if you choose to not, the first item on the top of page 3 is the waiving of penalties for non-payment. So yeah, if you don't pay, we will not charge you till the end of June for those for not paying. Same as if you were to remove yourself from the PAP program, that was asked earlier by a councillor, and there's no charge for that. So these are ones that are automatically applied. No shut off of water for that period, the parking enforcement as well. There are some under section 4 that are discretionary under the authority of the CAO, but those we've only approved very few with that.
Thank you.
Anything further?
Nothing further.
Any other councillors? If not, then I'll call the question on the resolution. All those in favor? None opposed. That is carried. That then takes us to new business and inquiries, and we'll deal with the items that are already on the agenda. Councillor Noyes, you have the resolution regarding the senior citizens, Crystal Beach BIA.
Yes, I do. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Dubanow, that council appoints Sandra Lyons to the Crystal Beach Business Improvement Area Board of Management for the period ending November 14th, 2022.
Are there any questions or comments? All those in favor? None opposed. That is carried. And Councillor Butler, you have the next resolution regarding the Ridgeway BIA.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor McDermott, that council accepts the resignation of Jennifer Wilkinson from the Ridgeway Business Improvement Area Board of Management, and further that council directs staff to proceed with filling the vacancy in accordance with the procedural bylaw.
Are there any questions or comments? All those in favor? None opposed. That is carried. That then takes us to resolution number 10, and this is the item that deals with the appointment of chairs and vice chairs for the 3 business subdivisions of the municipality. I understand that some of you have expressed an interest in certain of the subdivision committees. Most of you want to get some experience elsewhere. Some of you want to stay where you are. So what we'll do is we'll go through the list, and we'll start at the top with the Chair of Corporate and Community Services. And I'll ask for a nominator and a seconder. So we'll work our way through that. And Ms. Schofield, if we have more than one nomination, we obviously can't be doing this by closed ballot. I presume we'll do it by open vote?
Yes, that's
shaking your
correct.
head, yes.
What I would do is I would ask each councillor to pick one of the 2.
Yep, okay. Is everybody clear on that? So we'll start with nominations for the Chair of Corporate and Community Services. Councillor Zanko.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would like to nominate Councillor McDermott as Chair for Corporate Services. And
Okay.
Councillor, are we doing it individually or for?
We're going to do one at a time. Yeah.
Okay.
So we'll do the Chair of Corporate Services. You've nominated Councillor McDermott. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Butler. Any other nominations with respect to the Chair of Corporate and Community Services? If none, can I have a motion to close the nominations for that position? Councillor Zanko, seconded by Councillor Butler. I'll call that question to close nominations. All those in favor? That is carried. So Councillor McDermott, you are now the Chair of Corporate and Community Services. Vice Chair, and I should say that you can nominate yourself if you wish. Councillor Dubanow.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to nominate Councillor Butler as Vice Chair of Corporate and Community Services.
Thank you. And do we have a seconder for that? Councillor McDermott. Are there any other nominations for Vice Chair of Corporate and Community Services? There being none, Councillor Dubanow, would you move to close the nominations for that position?
Happily.
Seconder for that? Councillor McDermott, I'm looking at you. All those in favor of closing the nominations? That is carried. So Councillor Butler, you are the Vice Chair of Corporate and Community Services. Congratulations to you and Councillor McDermott. You'll be seeing a lot more of each other. I don't know if that's good or bad, but I'll be there periodically. Planning and Development Services. Can I have a motion for Chair? Councillor Zanko.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to nominate myself for Chair of Planning and Development Services.
Okay, can we have a seconder for that? Councillor McDermott. Are there any other nominations for Chair of Planning? If not, can I have a motion to close the nominations for that position? Councillor Butler and Councillor Noyes. All those in favor of closing the nominations? That is carried. So Councillor Zanko, you are now the Chair of Planning. Vice Chair of Planning and Development Services, Councillor Butler.
I'd like to nominate Councillor Dubanow for Vice Chair.
Okay. And a seconder?
I'll second it.
Councillor Zanko. Any other nominations with respect to Vice Chair of Planning and Development Services? Then Councillor Butler, would you mind moving to close the nominations? And seconded by Councillor Zanko?
Sure, yes.
Okay, so the nominations, closure of nominations, all those in favor? That is carried. So Councillor Dubanow and Councillor Zanko, you are now the Vice Chair and the Chair of Planning and Development Services. That gets us down to Infrastructure Services. And we need a nomination for Chair. Councillor McDermott.
I'd like to nominate Councillor Noyes as Chair of Infrastructure Services.
Seconder for that? Councillor Butler. Any other nominations for Infrastructure Services Chair? If not, I need a motion to close nominations. Councillor Lubberts, Councillor McDermott, all those in favor of closing the nominations for that position? That is carried. Councillor Noyes, you are the Chair. Councillor Lubberts, by dint of elimination, you are the Vice Chair of Infrastructure Services. Do you accept that position?
Yes.
There you go. So we have a slate, Madam Clerk, and I take it you've been making notes as we've proceeded. Okay, so Councillor Zanko, you have the resolution that would outline the new chairs and vice chairs of the three business subdivisions. Would you please read resolution number 10?
Yes, I would. I just need a seconder for this resolution.
Councillor Butler.
Okay. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Butler, that council appoints the following chairs and vice chairs to the business subdivisions for the period of May 20th, 2020 to July 31st, 2021. Corporate and Community Services, Chair Councillor McDermott, Vice Chair Councillor Butler. Planning and Development Services, Chair would be myself. Vice Chair would be Councillor Dubanow. Infrastructure Services, Chair Councillor Noyes, and Vice Chair would be Councillor Lubberts.
Any questions or comments? All those in favor? None opposed? That is carried. So the next resolution I have a conflict on. So Councillor McDermott, may I hand the chair to you? This is the one dealing with support of the Medical Staff Association.
Yes, Your Worship. Who has that one? Okay.
Councillor Dubanow has the resolution.
Councillor Dubanow?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Zanko. Whereas the Medical Staff Association of Niagara Health and the Medical Academies of Lincoln, Niagara, and Welland have collectively requested municipal support by way of a letter dated May 11th, 2020. And whereas the Ministry of Health has implemented billing codes for the provision of virtual care, and whereas these billing codes will not be paid to physicians in a timely manner, and whereas this will result in office closures and patients losing their physicians and becoming orphaned, now therefore be it resolved that the municipal the municipal council of the town of Fort Erie supports the letter dated May 11th, 2020 from the Medical Staff Association of Niagara Health and the Medical Academies of Lincoln, Niagara, and Welland, and further, that the municipal council of the town of Fort Erie hereby requests the Ministry of Health to ensure physicians are paid in a timely manner and that they support and that they are supported in a manner that does not result in offices being closed and patients being orphaned. And further, that a copy of this resolution be circulated to the Honorable Doug Ford, Premier of Ontario, the Honorable Christine Elliott, Minister of Health, Wayne Gates, MPP, Niagara Falls, Sam Osterhoff, MPP, Niagara West Glanbrook, Jennifer Stevens, MPP, St. Catharines, Jeff Birch, MPP, Niagara Center, the Regional Municipality of Niagara, and all Niagara area local municipalities for their support.
Thank you, Councillor Dubanow. Are there any comments or questions? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Back to you, Your Worship.
Thank you very much, Councillor McDermott. Councillor Dubanow, you had an item of new business or an inquiry?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to provide an update to council and the community on some of the stuff that's going on right now with gaming in Fort Erie, and I've just jotted down some notes here. At this time, there has been no signals from the province, OLG, or AGCO as to timelines for the reopening of bingo halls. All hall owners will have to determine an appropriate timeline as well as be given new regulations that need to be enforced. The most recent update from Delta Gaming was on March 30th, and it simply stated that all locations will remain closed until it is safe to reopen. Groups that have bingos back in March are going to be receiving that revenue. However, May is the first month where groups will not be receiving any gaming revenue. Even during this time right now, there are still groups out there that are trying to find a way to assist with what revenue they do have. And with the flexibility that has been offered by the province, we have received so far 6 requests from groups looking to donate and assist to the community. We've all have been approved. I have a list of them because I'd like to give them a shout out because they're still working hard in our community right now, despite all of the challenges we're facing. There have been, I'm looking here, it looks like we've got we received 4 requests from the Friends of Crystal Beach. It was primarily related to funding the Ridgeway Lions for their dinners, which they've been very successful with. We've also got a similar funding request from the Royal Canadian Legion Branch 230 that went to the Ridgeway Lions for their community dinners. And we also had one from the Connect Club, and I apologize, my notes here don't mention if it's Stevensville or Fort Erie, but that was for to assist with the funding of lodging for frontline workers at Douglas Memorial Hospital. And I just wanted to recognize them because despite all these trying times and the uncertainty we're going through, they are still taking the revenue they have and using it for things that benefit our community despite the challenges we're having. So I just wanted to provide council and the community with that information. Certainly any member of council, if you have any questions or want clarification on anything, fire me off an email. It's probably easiest, and I'd be happy to get any information I can for you.
Thank you, Councillor Dubanow, for that update. Any other inquiries or items of new business? Councillor Dubanow, yes.
Yeah, thank you. And I apologize. I should have mentioned this before. Earlier today, the Fort Erie Public Library Board had a one of our virtual Zoom meetings similar to this, and resolutions were passed regarding the opening for curbside pickup, which we hope to see commencing this Monday coming up. More details will be put out from the library regarding, the protocols that'll be followed, the hours of operation. I just wanted to mention that as well, because I know there's been several individuals who have reached out looking for information on that. And I just wanted to share it was good news that we're able to move forward.
Thank you, Councillor Dubanow. Did I see someone else's hand up? Councillor Butler and then Councillor Lubberts.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to ask a question to the Director of Planning, Ms. Dolch. Over the past week, we've been inundated with phone calls and emails with respect to Windmill Point Beach and one of the residents putting armor stone into the water directly onto the property line. Just wanted to know from you, I know we just received an email from you with respect to some information. I know that it's a civil matter right now because it's between the association and that landowner, but wanted to make sure that everybody understood that this was not an issue that the Fort Erie or the town of Fort Erie had issued a permit allowing this to happen. Could you clarify that for us, please?
Ms. Dolch?
Through you to the councillor, that's correct. The town has issued no permit for this type of work. We normally don't. It's for the NPCA to issue. However, it was they would have had to access onto our road allowance, and we did not provide permission for that either.
So that was a trespass in essence.
That's correct.
Thank you. Councillor Butler.
No, there's no further follow-up on that. I'm just going to follow up with the association and let them know.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other I'm sorry, Councillor Lubberts, you had your hand up. Yes,
Thank you, Mayor Redekop. Just to follow up on Councillor Dubanow's comments with the donations from groups to the food banks and to the Lions. I'm just wondering if maybe the gaming corporation or the town of Fort Erie could extend a special thank you to OLG or AGCO and thank them for lifting the restrictions to allow these groups to use their lottery funds outside of their mandate and to support the efforts of the Lions and the other food banks.
Is that, Councillor Dubanow, is that something that was required in order to permit the change in the allocation of fundings, or was that something done locally?
My understanding is that the province permitted that they made the change, which then allowed us to approve those requests. I have no issue with that. I can certainly bring it back to the board. I also personally want to extend my appreciation to the organizations that are doing this work right now and above and beyond. We're all kind of in a weird place right now, and to see people still continuing to serve the community, I think is fantastic. So not just OLG and the AGCO and the province, but I think even the organizations that are stepping up. I personally thank them, and I'll be mentioning that to the gaming board as well. See if even we can do that as well.
I think the CAO can ask the gaming manager to send a letter off of appreciation to the, I think it's the ACGO, isn't it? Whichever, them or the
It's one of
OLG.
them.
In terms of the letter of appreciation for the three specific groups that you've mentioned, I would suggest that we might want to wait a little longer because there are many organizations that have been nonprofit and for-profit that have been helping out in a variety of ways, and a lot of individuals engaged in this. So the generosity from the community over the past 10 weeks has been quite remarkable. So I would think maybe we want to gather our information before we start highlighting any two or three groups in view of the fact that there are a number of groups. As for example, these groups that have donated money to the Lions have, I think, put out over It's several thousand meals over the last several weeks. But there are also other organizations that are providing meals and delivering them, and groups that are working in food banks. I'm told that although there's a need right now, as time goes on, the need gets greater. And so that the food banks do expect to have greater need as time goes on. So perhaps we could send something out to the ACGO or the OLG now and put something together, an expression of appreciation from the council and the municipality later on. Any other items of new business or inquiries? I'm sorry, Councillor Dubanow, did you want to
No,
speak?
I just really quickly wanted to touch on that every request that we've received of this nature so far has been approved. And I completely agree with that there are other organizations out there that are doing work. You touched on a good point. The emergency benefits that are in place right now, how long they last, we don't know. And it's going to be when those benefits end and people start returning to work, and who knows what work will be available for them. That's when the need is really going to kick in. And I'm glad you touched on that, because everything seems okay right now, but we're only just getting started on that angle. So thank you very much, Your Worship, for mentioning that.
Right. Any other inquiries or items of new business? If not, then that takes us to motions, and Councillor Butler, you have a motion with respect to personal facial masks.
Yes, Your Worship, thank you. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor McDermott. Whereas the federal and provincial governments have been guided by advice from science and health professionals to date in dealing with the COVID-19 emergency and should continue to do so. And whereas Canadians have been asked to stay at home and maintain physical distance from others if they go out to help flatten the curve of COVID-19. And whereas the federal and provincial governments are beginning to expand the scope of business allowed to operate and locations where people may go as the economy is reopened. And whereas there will be more businesses opening up, more individuals returning to work, and more patronage in local area businesses that will assist in moving the economy forward in a positive direction. And whereas given that more people will be coming into closer contact with each other, there is a risk for the spread of the novel coronavirus to rise as a direct result. And whereas it would be wise to add to the government's plan to mitigate that risk by implementing a policy and directive with respect to the wearing of non-medical masks when physical distancing is not possible. And whereas local, national, and global public health officials agree that there are individuals who disclose or display no symptoms who may be carriers of the virus, those who have mild symptoms and are about to get sick, as well as those who are sick but don't know that they are infected with COVID-19 who could transmit the virus. And whereas Canada's Chief Public Health Officer, Dr. Theresa Tam, has recently issued new advice for Canadians to wear a non-medical face mask to help cut down the spread of the novel coronavirus to others by reducing the chance of respiratory droplets coming into contact with others or landing on surfaces. And whereas there remains some discord among health authorities as to the efficacy of wearing facial masks, but there seems to be clear agreement that in some circumstances, a facial mask will assist in reducing the risk of the wearer spreading the virus. And whereas facial masks for personal use need not be medical grade, but can be made out of readily available things in people's homes, such as scarves, bandanas, sheets, denim, and cotton shirts as examples. And whereas Canadians can help by taking this additional measure when there are situations where proper physical distancing from others is difficult. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Council of the Town of Fort Erie hereby requests the Prime Minister of Canada and the Premier of Ontario to consider implementing policies regarding the wearing of masks when social distancing is not possible, and within essential services such as grocery stores, pharmacies, and the like, as society is reopening following the current emergency, and further, that any such policies remain in place until such time that it can be demonstrated that the curve of the virus spread has been flattened and the outbreak is contained, and further, that the federal and provincial governments adopt an educational program providing instruction on how to make your own personal facial mask, proper use of a facial mask in the circumstances specified, and safe handling procedures of a facial mask. And further, that a copy of this resolution be circulated to the Right Honorable Justin Trudeau, Prime Minister, the Honorable Doug Ford, Premier of Ontario, Wayne Gates, MPP Niagara Falls, the Regional Municipality of Niagara, and all Niagara area local municipalities for their support.
Councillor Butler, did you wish to speak to that?
I do. First, I want to start out by saying something that I've said many times and is worth repeating again, that I have never been prouder of the leadership shown by our collective governments of Canada. They've really stepped up to the plate to help Canadians on so many fronts. And secondly, we are safe because of the guidance that we have been receiving, and that guidance is put in place to help flatten the curve so that we don't overwhelm our frontline workers in the healthcare field. So with the province beginning to open businesses and related entities in phases, and with the nice weather upon us, our natural tendencies are to go out, live our lives, and enjoy the great outdoors. But we cannot be lulled into a false sense of security. And that means as individuals, we need to continue to be mindful and vigilant about our safety and the health and well-being of others. And the advice of wearing masks in public has been ever evolving. Both our Chief Public Health Officer of Canada, Dr. Theresa Tam, and our Provincial Minister of Health, Christine Elliott, as recently as last Thursday, advocated to the public to wear non-medical and/or cloth masks when social distancing is difficult. So to me and to many others that I speak with, it makes a lot of sense to wear a face covering, especially in grocery and retail stores, pharmacies, and public spaces where you are getting into close proximity to someone. And some people may find wearing a mask uncomfortable or an added burden to their day. I know I did. And that being said, it is important for everyone to understand that wearing non-medical or cloth masks shortens the trajectory of droplets emitted through coughing or sneezing. And some recent studies suggest that spread can be contained by 75% just through the use of masks. It may not be necessarily protective to the wearer, but if everyone wears one, then it strengthens everyone's protection. And at the same time, it is vital to mention that it is equally important to have an education piece and safe handling procedures for masks while you're wearing them, the disposal of the paper masks, and proper washing methods for cloth masks to keep yourself safe.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. I must say that if I go into a store, I wear one, my wife wears one. It helps to protect perhaps those around me, not necessarily me, but those around me. Any other comments? Councillor Dubanow.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. And I am prepared to support this motion, but there are some comments and some thoughts that I'd like to get off my chest and mention here right now. And I appreciate Council giving me the opportunity to do this. So the motion mentions that there's still some discord and public health officials are still, there's still some concern, and there's not necessarily a consensus on this. So I want to read a comment from Dr. Bonnie Henry, and she's the Chief Public Health Official for the province of British Columbia. She's one of the top level public health officials in the country. She helped establish the Canada Pandemic Plan, which we are using right now. She worked with the WHO in Pakistan to rid of, I think it was polio. She worked in Uganda for Ebola. She was the Associate Medical Officer of Health in Toronto during SARS and H1N1. And the Globe and Mail described Dr. Henry as a calming voice in a sea of coronavirus madness. And the comments that I want to read, and this is available right on the British Columbia government's website. As Dr. Theresa Tam, Canada's Chief Public Health Officer, has explained, a non-medical cloth mask or face covering can help you keep your own droplets out of the air and off surfaces. Choosing to wear such a face covering is like coughing or sneezing into a tissue or your sleeve. A non-medical cloth mask or face covering, while helpful in containing your own droplets, will not protect you from COVID-19, nor is wearing one required of you if you can keep your safe distance from others. Moreover, using a cloth mask does not give you permission to disregard physical distancing and self-isolation orders. Indeed, these, along with respiratory etiquette and hand hygiene, remain the key proven measures to stop transmission. Wearing a cloth mask or face covering is a matter of personal choice. It is another tool you can choose, particularly when maintaining that important safe distance can be a challenge. Our most important advice remains the same. If you are sick, you should stay home. Wearing a cloth mask may contain your virus droplets, but it does not make it okay to go out. Maintain a safe distance from others when you are out. Clean your hands regularly and avoid touching your face. And there was an article also in the CBC the other day. British Columbia is going through a similar reopening that we are here. And they asked her what her opinion was. And she said, I really don't believe we should be requiring it, said Henry during a briefing on Tuesday afternoon. That CBC article was from, it looks like that was from May 13th. So it was just from a couple days ago. And she also said, and I'll read it right from the article here, Dr. Henry said masks can be useful during short periods of time where maintaining a physical distance is challenging. And then in quotes, it says, so the bottom line is it's a measure. It's not the most effective measure we have to prevent transmission. And there are some situations where it may be useful. And I'm going to read another part that I think is essential, very important. She also asked people not to stigmatize others for their choice, whether it is to wear one or not. And I'd be happy to provide counsel and anyone who needs wants this information, these documents. Also, just so everyone's aware, I went on to Public Health Ontario's website today to look at the guidance regarding the use of face coverings. And this is right from their website. I took it actually right off at the beginning of the meeting. The best way you can stop the spread of COVID-19 is by staying home and avoiding close contact with others outside of your household. You may consider using a face covering, and they say a non-medical mask, such as a cloth mask or a bandana, to reduce the risk of transmission of COVID-19 in areas where physical distancing may be challenging or not possible, such as public transit, smaller grocery stores or pharmacies, and when you are receiving essential services. Medical masks, surgical, medical, procedural face masks, and respirators like N95 masks should be reserved for use by healthcare workers and first responders. Now, to touch on that, Dr. Bonnie Henry and others like Dr. David Williams, Dr. Mustafa Herji at the region, they all have a medical background and a public health background. Dr. Henry specifically, she went to Dalhousie University. She got her public health master's in San Diego. While she was working on her degree, she was a public health officer with the Royal Canadian Navy. And then she worked in the Faculty of Public Health at the University of Toronto. So her credentials and the credentials of others like Dr. Tam and the others that I mentioned, they mean something. And, that's why our tax dollars pay to fund public health agencies like these. There are many people out there, for better or worse, who think they have all the answers, but they don't. We have to rely on these experts who have an academic background and experience to contextualize new information, to weigh the pros of droplet containment versus the cons of cross-contamination. We have to listen to them, and I do. So to that end, not about this council here, but when you read social media and you hear some of the comments in the community, I'm concerned that there are those out there who do not believe that they are giving us the best advice, that there's some conspiracy to hoard masks or something along those lines. I have no doubt that people like Dr. Bonnie Henry, if this was the end all and we could solve COVID-19 tomorrow, that they would recommend that everyone, not just recommend, I think they would order that everyone wear a mask. They don't. So that tells me something, that they may know those pros and cons. They say you can do it, but they don't say you have to. So this is my advice, and I appreciate the latitude you're giving me, your worship. But to the residents of Fort Erie, I trust your judgment. Your judgment is the reason we are all here. And our community has done so well following the guidelines from public health. I know we have some outliers, but they're the exception, not the norm. I'm proud of our community and everything we have done to get through this pandemic. I don't feel it's right for me to question your judgment when your judgment put me here. So this is what I'm going to say. If you choose not to wear a mask, I respect that choice. As a fellow member of the community, I ask that you continue to maintain all of the physical distancing requirements, wash your hands, and stay home as much as possible like you've already been doing. Be diligent and respectful of others. And I can't stress that enough. Follow the arrows on the floor. Don't linger around others. Don't look over people's shoulders. Communicate with people so they know what you're doing. Just general all around. I hate to say this, but don't be a jerk. If you're going out into the store, be respectful. And if you choose to wear a mask, I respect your right to do that. And as a fellow member of the community, I ask you, please use it properly, okay? It's a medical device. It's not a toy.
Councillor Dubanow, I'm going to ask you to wind it up.
Yeah.
I have given you
Okay.
lots of latitude.
No, I appreciate that. And I want to get this part out though. Don't play with it. Don't touch it constantly. Don't pull it down. Follow the guidelines. And whether you decide to wear one or not, listen to people in the public health officials and listen to them for their guidance. They're doing this to keep us safe. So I'm supporting this motion because I think it touches on some very important things, but I challenge all of you to continue doing what we're doing. And I appreciate the latitude you gave me, Your Worship. And this is something that's been going back and forth. I appreciate the time to get my thoughts out there. I will be supporting this motion. Thank you.
Yeah, that's good. And before I go back to you, Councillor Butler, if you want to say anything further, I just want to point out that there are other major health authorities in North America that support people wearing masks. So that's why the use, I'm sure, of the word discord was utilized, because there is conflicting evidence with respect to this. This resolution is based on, or is premised on, health and science, and asks the upper levels of government to consider implementing policies with an educational component. Councillor Butler, did you want to make any further comments?
No, I think I'd rather listen to the other councillors. Thank
Yeah,
you.
okay. Any other councillors? Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Mayor Redekop. I will say that I am disappointed when I go this past weekend. I go grocery shopping and I shop for my sister, I shop for my uncle, I shop for myself. I am disappointed at seeing the people who are not wearing masks and are not keeping social distances. And I'm saying they go hand in hand, but I think sometimes they forget about the social distancing when they're reaching for the tomato or they're reaching for their, whatever. So I am disappointed when people aren't wearing masks. I know I went to a greenhouse this weekend. And again, I think out of the 10 of us, 2 of us were wearing masks. Social distancing was not kept. Again, because people forget, they're looking at their flowers, they're looking at theirs, they're talking to each other, they don't realize there's somebody ahead. So it's hard to, kind of keep that 6-foot distance. And when you're not wearing a mask and you're not keeping that 6-foot distance, you are putting myself and therefore my family at risk for a serious for a serious disease. And I think putting me at risk, I can be disappointed, and I do think that it should be much stronger in regards to people wearing masks. I think I don't think anything that Councillor Dubanow has said, or it's basically said anybody said it's not a good idea to wear a mask. I think it is a good idea to wear a mask. It's not the be all and end all, mind you. Hand hygiene and social distancing are also the priority, and I can understand that. I think enforcing people wearing masks may be next to impossible. I mean, that may be one of the reasons it's not a rule. But again, I see in many stores, no shoes, no shirt, no service. And I would like to see that sign saying no mask, no service. And again, I think it's a tool in our toolbox. It's a valuable tool, and I think it has to be recognized as such. And I fully support council drawing attention to this and strongly encouraging people to wear the mask. It helps everyone, including themselves.
Thank you, Councillor Noyes. Did I see any other hands up? If not, then I'm going to call the question. All those in favor of Councillor Butler's resolution? None opposed? That is carried. I think that's a helpful debate. And Councillor Dubanow, I think you're absolutely correct. We've got some basic rules. People need to follow those basic rules. And Councillor Noyes, I think your observations are also accurate. I think, as I mentioned in my opening comments, I think complacency is very dangerous for us. And I think many people are becoming complacent. And as more things open, I think people are misinterpreting the success that we're having and maybe are thinking that it's greater than it actually is. We still need to remain vigilant. So that takes us to notices of motion. Councillor Zanko.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I do have notice of motion, and that is that Parks and Beaches bylaw number 119-03 as amended be further amended to restrict any persons from staying in any park as their place of residence at any time, and further that the administrative penalty be implemented in the amount of $100 and be issued to any person that violates this provision. And I'm also hoping that we can waive the rules of procedure this evening so we can deal with this today.
Okay, so my understanding is that there's been an ongoing issue with respect to individuals that have been living in one or more of our public parks. Is that the concern?
That is the concern, and our current bylaw only restricts them from staying in our public parks after 11 p.m.
Right. On that basis, I would be prepared to consider a motion to waive the rules so that you can deal with this tonight if you have a seconder. Councillor McDermott? Yeah, Councillor McDermott is prepared to second that. So we have a motion before us to waive the rules of procedure to permit Councillor Zanko to bring for consideration this evening the notice of motion that she has just made reference to. Is everybody clear on that? All those in favor of waiving the rules of procedure to permit this to proceed? None opposed, that is carried. Councillor Zanko, could you reread then the motion that you wish council to now consider, and do you have a seconder for that motion?
I do. Councillor Noyes has seconded my motion, and that
Thank
motion
you.
reads that Parks and Beaches bylaw number 119-03 as amended be further amended to restrict any persons from staying in any park as their place of residence at any time, and further that an administrative penalty be implemented in the amount of $100 and be issued to any person who violates this provision.
Okay, thank you. Did you want to speak any further to that?
Yeah, you did cover my concern, Your Worship. I mean, the issue is at these parks now, children will be, very soon allowed to be playing at parks, and it's just no place for this. I'm happy that my colleagues did support this, so this could be implemented rather quickly.
My understanding is as well that it's somewhat disturbing to people that are living in the vicinity of these parks where individuals are staying. Does anyone have any questions with respect to the motion, Councillor Dubanow?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship, and I'm very supportive of this. I just have one question through you, perhaps to the planning director. There's mention of an administrative fine, and I would imagine that someone who's living in a park probably doesn't have the financial means to pay a $100 fine. And I'm just wondering if perhaps Ms. Dolch could explain what other options we have. Would we be able to remove them from the park? I'm curious how we would actually enforce it when we could be dealing with a member of our community who just doesn't have the financial means to pay any fine at all.
Ms. Dolch?
Through to the councillor. Yeah, so right now our Parks and Beaches bylaw is under the AMP system, so we do have a fine associated with it. I do agree with you, they may not be able to afford that fine. We do have other means, obviously, to remove them from the park at that point once we indicate that they can no longer reside in that park. Right now, the difficulty, we do have the trespass orders on some individuals, but the difficulty right now is our bylaw staff don't work after 11 p.m. So this way we do have some more abilities to start to monitor and control the situations occurring in our parks.
Councillor Dubanow?
Yeah, and one other question, would this be something that would be enforced by the town bylaw, or would this be a Niagara Regional Police type enforcement?
Ms. Dolch?
This would be enforced by our bylaw staff. Obviously, after hours, we would be as well looking to the police and others.
Thank you,
Councillor
Your Worship.
Dubanow.
No, we're good. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments with respect to the motion before us? Then I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion? None opposed. That is carried. Are there any other notices of motion this evening? If not, then we're going to go to consideration of bylaws. And Councillor Noyes, you have first and second reading of the confirmatory bylaw.
Thank you, Mayor Redekop. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Dubanow. That ballot number 49, 2020, to confirm the actions of council at its council meeting held on May 19, 2020 is given first and second reading.
All those in favor? None opposed. That is carried. Councillor Lubberts, you have third and final reading of that bylaw.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Redekop. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Dubanow. The bylaw number 49, 2020 is given third and final reading to be signed by the mayor and clerk under the corporate seal.
Are there any questions or comments? All those in favor? None opposed. That is carried. Scheduling of meetings. Councillor Noyes.
There is an infrastructure meeting on May 25th at 5 p.m.
Sorry, what was the date again? May 25th?
May 25th at 5. That's Monday.
Yep. Any other meetings scheduled? Okay. I can tell you that if I haven't already, I recently was contacted by the mayor of Sault Ste. Marie, who contacted all of the mayors along the border, or almost all of the mayors along the border. Had a conversation with Mayor Mike Bradley of Sarnia, spoke also to Mayor Provenzano of Sault Ste. Marie. He's in the process of setting up a Zoom meeting for approximately 15 to 18 border mayors to discuss our concern about the reopening of the border. And it will probably shift into some other areas of concern to us. So this may be a good opportunity to activate a larger border mayors group to help us deal with some of the issues that we're faced with. So that will be coming up shortly. I'm not sure yet, hasn't been established, but I'll keep you posted. There being no other meetings then, Councillor Dubanow, I'll call upon you to move to adjourn.
Yeah, I always seem to get these resolutions.
Sorry. Fine with me. It's good news when we get to you.
Yeah, true enough. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor McDermott, that council adjourns at 7:24 p.m. to reconvene into a regular meeting of council on June 15th, 2020.
All those in favor? None opposed. That is passed. Thank you very much, everyone.